Hello, Endersword here again, this time with a video on the top 5 improvements that I would like Star Trek Fleet Command to make in 2024. The communications team has come out and said that that Scopely is basically looking to focus on quality over quantity this year and hopefully address some of the quality issues that the game has been having. So I wanted to go through a list of things that I'd really like them to look at, of things that have either used to be good and have kind of drifted in the wrong direction, or maybe some things that were never really that strong to begin with, but I think could help strengthen the game and make it a better experience for everyone going forward. So some of these things may not be your play style, but I think in general it's stuff that we should look forward to trying to fix. The first is going to be PvP diversity. PvP is really a big thing to me. I know that a lot of players aren't really into it, and I think part of the reason that some people aren't really into it is because they feel that they can't compete with it or aren't interested in the style of play that you get out of PvP. It just kind of feels like bigger ship wins, person that spends the most money wins, and there's no point in really competing with that. I kind of feel that several years ago, probably 2 to 3 years ago, that was less the case, in that there was more counterplay that you could actually do. There were more viable crews that you could actually put together, and on certain different types of ships, you could really play into what the battle triangle was, and specifically crew to things that either improved your damage, improved your mitigation, improved your shield regen, improved your hull regen, things like that, that kind of really specifically targeted the type of opponent that you were facing, that allowed you to punch up a lot more than it did once the crews became more homogenized. So there are ways that you could specifically say, hey, the target that I'm going after is a battleship, and it is a Klingon battleship. So here's a crew that I can put together that has both damage bonus in the battle triangle, as well as bonus damage against Klingons, or just attacks it in such a way that I know he uses this type of crew, so I'm going to use this type of crew that kind of counters it, that cancels out their crits or does something to ruin their strategy. I feel that there used to be a lot more options that you could go with there. We then entered kind of a mid-phase where there were these strike teams that came out that were inarguably basically the best crews that you could put together for each type of ship that you had available. But the battle triangle was still kind of alive and well in that you could still beat a battleship by driving a interceptor into it. You could still beat an explorer by driving a battleship into it, and so on. That you had some advantage there when it came to mitigation. Also, the way that the crews were designed kind of worked in tandem with that battle triangle to really try and counter the strength of the opposing ship. So just kind of the abilities that it had, that for instance, the battleship would ignore the shields. So Strike Team Una would lower the amount of mitigation that a shield did, while very often the way that explorers work is that they are getting morale and regenerating their shields. So if you look at like the 34 epic ships, the battleship crew was designed specifically to take down the Enterprise and so on. But now we've gotten the isolytic crews that have really taken the battle triangle completely out of the game. So I think that quite a while ago we lost the faction triangle, or the idea that you could target down a specific faction. This is going to be a Romulan ship, I'm going to put on anti-Romulan officers. That kind of drifted away a while ago, but the battle triangle is still intact. Now, because of the way isolytic damage works, it ignores the mitigation of a ship, and the mitigation of a ship was the mechanism in which the battle triangle worked, that your type of weapon hit his strongest part of defense, so he's going to mitigate a lot more of it, or your strongest weapon hits their weakest part of defense, so they're going to mitigate a lot less of it, and that's what gives you the advantage. The isolytic damage completely ignores all of that, and so it just doesn't really matter what type of ship that you have anymore. A battleship going up against an interceptor is basically just as good. Although if you ask me, out of the three, the interceptor has the inherent advantage simply because hull breach is the best of the three abilities compared to morale and burning. It's just kind of the strongest one innately. And we've also got combat that just lasts a much briefer amount of time. Most combat is now 1 round, maybe 2 rounds. You don't really have a chance for other officers to actually take effect. So a lot of things used to kind of require 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds to actually kick in fully. That's not, you just don't have that runway anymore. There's no time. So if things don't kick in the first round and just do a ton of damage, then they're not really going to work, and it's not going to be a viable strategy. That's just kind of the way that we've gone, that pure damage has outpaced any defensive ability that you could have or anything that took a while to ramp up. So it just kind of screwed a few things over. And even some of the stuff like the below decks officers, they're helpful, but there's not much counterplayer diversity there. It's just a matter of, okay, here's the best ones, just put them underneath and they're never going to be wrong. So you're more likely to stack up a single ship and not care about what its type. Whereas before you kind of had to have 2 or 3 really good ships, and then you're trying to get someone to basically steer into the wrong one. So you're trying to control 2 or 3 ships at the same time and make sure that your interceptor hits their battleship, that your explorer hits their interceptor, and so on. Now that doesn't really matter. So the actual physical play of the game, of moving and maneuvering your ships around, trying to bait someone into something or try and catch them from the side, isn't really part of the game anymore, which really takes a lot of the play out. But I know this one doesn't affect that many people. It's kind of my favorite area, but we'll move on to number 4, which is kind of more impacting everyone. It is screen time inflation. Here we had a really good move about, I should have looked up when, but about a year ago when the freebooters came out. It was a really, really good improvement to screen time, that it took away the amount of time that you need to be farming Swarm every day. It took away your need to farm a lot of faction chips every day in order to do your dailies. And suddenly you could just go to this one space that was relatively nearby, do these ships, kill like 5 to 8 of them, depending what your daily is. And that one thing would basically finish probably over half your dailies just by doing the freebooters. So it saved you a lot of time in going to these specialty systems with specialty ships, going into, you know, some deep space faction, taking all that warp time and so on. It really simplified the game and kind of cut down the screen time that was required to do it. But I feel in the months after that, that has kind of inflated back to a point that it was. So some of the tasks that were originally there, like the Borg probes for a Vidar or Talios now, as they introduced the Talios, we suddenly have to do that a lot more. The Actian Venom is just kind of a daily task that you have to do in order to keep up with that ship. And as you level up, the amount that you need to do to open the chests just kind of gets exponentially bigger. So if you want to be keeping up on your pulls for the S&W crew, want to be keeping up on the Mantis itself, and then the all-important Syndicate pulls, then you really need to be spending a lot of time in that. And unfortunately, the Actium one in particular is a very time-consuming one because you're trying to target down a specific ship type. You're trying to get those interceptors and fill up your cargo and do it in an efficient way. So it's not one that you could just kind of do mindlessly. There's the Gem Hadar things that you need every day for the Bajoran loop, the Solar Armadas and so on. You want to be collecting those every day, or at least filling up your hull every few days in order to keep up with that. And now 2 of the most recent ones is the Borg Cube, which kind of sucks. I know some people like it as I like it as a thing, but I don't like the Borg Cube loop at all. I think the way that you charge the beam and then use the beam to collect technological distinctiveness, it just takes a lot of time. I think in the first month that it came out, where there were tons of events around that. A lot of people probably saved up a lot, and I'm now at the point that I've kind of run out of that, and now I'm just kind of daily going out and doing a grind, and each time just to do the daily pull at maximum, I'm going out and killing like 100 ships in order to keep up with this, and that's kind of annoying, and particularly since it's just not a very fun ship. They build it as very, very good, and it's not. I think it is well into the 60s. Supposedly it gets good, but most of us aren't there yet. So I've heard a lot of people being pretty underwhelmed with it. But the point is that it is taking up a lot of time. And then just in this past month, while I do kind of like them, the wave defense were also just taking up a lot of time. That doing a full wave defense to wave 10 was about 15 minutes or so. And that's without accounting for the fact that you have to kind of put a group together sometimes or wait around for people to join and things like that. And for a lot of people out there, they needed to do 3 or 4 of those a day to finish some of the daily missions. So you're kind of spending an hour on just that sort of thing. And it also requires you to really pay attention. Whereas if you're farming throughout the day, you can kill a couple things, focus on something else, pick up your phone, pick up your device, whatever later, kill a couple more things. You could just do it throughout the day, but there's starting to be more things in the game where you really need to pay attention for a block of time to be able to do it. You can't just like start an armada, go in it and wait for 15 minutes to count down. You don't have to pay attention. For wave defense, you kind of, if you're going to do it that day, you kind of have to pay attention for like an hour to get your things done. So I think that's something that I'd like them to look at going forward, how much time you need to spend on these things. The other one I didn't mention is the Voyager loop. The Voyager loop, every couple days, you need to go out there with Voyager, be killing a pretty big number of the Hirogen, be killing a big number of the 8472, also mining with Voyager, and mining with Voyager is also very active. You can't just go on a node and wait. You go on one of those common nodes, it mines itself out in like 15 seconds. You got to go to the next one, next one, next one, next one. So it's not an AFK activity. It's something that you're doing fairly actively, and you need to be doing that multiple times or many times a week, basically, to keep up with that. So I hope that's something that they take a look at. I know it's something that other content creators have talked about, and I hope that they make some adjustment to bring that screen time down, because it's getting to the point that it's just several hours a day of just farming, and that's without even doing anything kind of elective. Number 3 is the free-to-play tuning. Here, I think they've tried to make some progress with it. There's a few things that they've added in to give some free-to-play paths to certain things, like prime research. You can get dolomite particles now and the wave defense thing. But then I think they also, the people that are free to play that need that sort of thing also do really bad in wave defenses, because they tuned the content so high that people that are in their 30s and low 40s can barely get past wave 2 before they can only kill the surveys in order to contribute for their group. So just the strength of things has been really hard. But one thing that I've kind of noticed, so I've got my own account here that's level 57, but I've got a free-to-play account where I've quite specifically never bought anything on it, just because I want to get a sense of what the true free-to-play path is. And I've got that up to level 38 now in a little under a year. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that it is easier to level up. So it's easier to increase your ops level than it was when I originally started playing. But there's certain things that really, really lag behind on that. And one of those biggest things is officer sourcing. So there are just more officers in the game now, and it doesn't feel like they've really increased the number of ultra recruits or rare recruits that you get in the game, despite the fact that they've added a lot more. So in my late 30s on that free-to-play account, there's tons of officers that I just don't even have yet that are very important. So like Beverly Crusher, to be able to do some of the Armada, Solar Armada stuff. Some of the Trinity officers, I've only unlocked one of the 3, but they're pretty important to beating some of the mission bosses in the game, or as a strategy to do that. They're also really good for some of the away teams and things. So I feel like they've helped you level up a lot quicker in that they're giving more materials and things like that, and there's more efficiencies in the game, but there hasn't been something added to then help you do some of the other parts of the game. The other thing that's really striking as you go through the mid-30s is that there are so many specialty ships, that there's basically like 6 or 7 specialty ships that you need to be picking up between level 33 and 38 that really take a lot out of your resources available and start to consume things like Latinum in terms of ship parts and stuff. The old path of something like a Stella, where you would get it and level it, and the only thing you needed was the unique ship part for that thing, has kind of been pushed out, and they seem to now be saying, yeah, you need Voyager parts, but we also want you to use gas. We also want you to use Explorer parts. We also want you to use these other resources. So it's no longer that you're leveling things up just on the specialty part. It's the specialty part plus the resources that you need. So there becomes a crunch in the mid-30s where you really want to be leveling up probably the epic ship that you just got, but a lot of these other things are consuming the exact same resources. The Talios is taking it, the Voyager's taking it, the Titan's taking it, the Cerritos is taking it. They're all taking the same resources that should be going into those main ships. So I think tuning that a little different could be really beneficial. There are some things that they've done well on. It's obviously easier now with the Mantis to get your syndicate up and things like that. But I think basically what they've done is taken some parts of the game and tripled, quadrupled the speed, and then other parts of the game they've just left completely the same. So you end up with this real imbalance, and I see this in my alliance all the time, that people are now in their low 40s and they're asking, like, what's a good crew suggestion for this? You look through their crew docket basically, and they don't have this guy, they don't have this guy, they don't have this. There's so many people now that are like level 40 and they don't have 5 of 11, which is such a crucial thing. But there's just so many things that you can get in an ultra recruit poll, and we've never really increased the number that you get. So it's just more diversified, and they're not quite getting it. Some people have the advice of, well, then just go slower so that you get more before it diversifies. But again, that's just leading to you going slower. And the whole point is the game seems to be trying to speed you up to get to the point where the bulk of the players are, so that you're kind of with everyone. And I feel that that is in the high 30s, low 40s now is where kind of the bulk of the player base is. So they want you to go there. If you do that by going intentionally slow, it kind of defeats that purpose. It feels like we've got these things going faster. We just need to bring some of these other things up to make that more accessible to people. The faction credits is another thing like that, where a lot of things function on how many faction credits you have to be able to buy blueprints at certain milestones. Because you're getting there faster, but because the income of those faction credits has not increased ever, then you're getting there without having the ability to buy the thing that you should be able to buy, whether that's your 34 ship, your 42 ship, whatever it is, because that has kind of lagged behind in development. So observation there. Number 2 is kind of a big one for me, and I think this affects everyone at all levels, and I think it affects really the basic design of what the game actually is, which is the lack of consistency in how the game works and what the events actually are in the game. So when I kind of started things out, you kind of learn what the rhythm is. You learn that there are certain events that happen, every 6 hours, 12 hours, whatever, and you kind of want to be saving some resources to be playing into that system to get the rewards for it. Then there are the monthly arcs that come out. And while monthly arcs, the theme and everything is going to be different, and they may have new features and things like that, there should be some semblance of consistency of what you can expect in a normal arc. So to give an example of something that is relatively consistent now, is we kind of know that in an arc, every weekend there's going to be a spend event that happens where we are going to use that spend event for the resources that you've saved up to be able to complete an SMS and compete in a leaderboard in order to unlock the officers for that month. That didn't always used to be the case. So if we rewind back about a year, there was a period of time where unlocking an officer came mostly from the events itself. There was a period where unlocking an officer, I think Wei Yun was like this, or maybe it was Gul Dukat, one of those, was based on you could turn a bunch of ultra recruits into polls for that officer and other officers from that month. So you could kind of trade in, I think it was 16,000 ultra recruits for one poll of this month's officer. And then of course you could buy packs that were for that. You could always buy stuff. That's the one thing that's consistent. But the way to acquire officers has changed over time. And even those weekend polls has drastically changed in that they keep changing the amount that you need, whether they're raising it, lowering it. Now they've pulled the trick of the 3-star and 4-star mats are now worth a lot less. And there used to be a lot bigger difference between uncommon 5-star and uncommon rare, which they've now compressed. It's no longer 4 times as much. It's like 2 times as much. And then they've changed the milestones on everything. They constantly change how much they're actually offering you, whether it's a full pull, whether it's a partial pull, and you have to then try and win the leaderboard. They're changing what people's brackets are in these things. So, the level 60 plus is new. I'm now competing with level 60 plus people in those brackets. I don't know if they're going to change that going forward, but it basically creates an environment where you can't really plan for anything. So it always felt that, particularly as a low spender or free to play player, you could kind of say, I'm going to save up a whole bunch of these resources so then when there's a really good officer that comes out, I can spend my resources in order to be able to take advantage of that and complete the milestone. But then someone that did that 3-4 months ago and then tried to get the Enterprise E officers found that the value of the things that they own has been cut by 80%. And they just kind of axed the entire thing. The other thing is just unannounced events that they do. Again, lack any form of consistency. And what it results in is people hoarding resources, not knowing if there's actually going to be an event or not. And it just kind of conditions people to always keep everything until there is an event that goes with it. But sometimes you then go months without having that event. So something that they did, I forget if it was 3 or 4 months ago, was there was a period where you could spend a lot of Armada starts in order to get a pretty good return of unlocking Hugh. Hugh is a very valuable officer. If you don't have him, you basically need him. He's one of the best officers in the game. So they came up with this event in like an unannounced way, or I think they gave like a day's notice or something, did it on one day. I think they did the same event again 5 days later, and now it's been 3 months and they haven't done it again. So you've now trained people, don't use your rare and epic Armada starts if you don't have to, if there's not an event for it, but we're not doing that event again. So there's a lot of people that have just saved them up and aren't using them for anything, but they're not consistently doing something they set a precedent for. Similar with things like ultra recruits. There have been months where there's been either alliance leaderboards or individual leaderboards where ultra recruit spending was very, very important. That if somebody had saved up several 100,000 of these ultra recruits, that could mean the difference between getting a big epic officer unlock or some large reward, and completely missing out on that. So I know a lot of people hoard up hundreds and thousands of the things, but there hasn't been an event like that in at least 3 months. There's the small daily events where you need to spend, a few thousand of them to complete, but there hasn't been something that's allowed or asked you to just dump hundreds of thousands of them in order to try and compete in the leaderboard. But the moment you spend it, you kind of know that they're going to come out with that the next day. The other thing that kind of frustrates me is particularly when something is that month, like, so the Borg Cube came out last month, you know that there's going to be a Borg Cube spending event or like spend your parts event for it. But they tend to do that on a day's delayed basis. And that, I think, just kind of saps some of the fun out of the game. So you've got a new ship, you want to be using your new ship, but then you're told, well, every week there's going to be an event where you have to spend your research parts or your ship parts to upgrade that thing. So then I should just be hoarding them in the meantime and not actually using and upgrading my ship. But I just got it. I want to upgrade my ship. So I think if you're doing that sort of thing, it should be something that's either like a month or week-long event so that you can kind of pour things into it instead of starting and stopping. The other thing is when they do that in a way that is very counterintuitive, or they continue to do it for the next month, but not really warn you that that may happen. So, for instance, there was more of that sort of Borg Cube spending stuff that happened this month. So what that's trained me to do is I could upgrade my Borg Cube right now to tier 10, but I'm not going to, because I don't know whether or not there's going to be something next month that requires me to do it. And just because there isn't something next month that requires me to do it doesn't mean that there won't be in February and won't be in March. So anytime that I do it when there's not an event, you can end up feeling like a sucker for just playing the game and just upgrading your stuff when you have it available. And they've done a very similar thing with things like the artifact things. They've done it with building upgrades that, you know, there was randomly an event that was not on the calendar where they're just like, okay, if you upgrade the armory and the command center and whatever, then here's the leaderboard for it. And they said that with a couple days notice. Well, you've never done that event before. Or you've done a modification of that event before where it was focused on like a fleet commander or something. So you coming up with a new something kind of makes me feel like I want to hoard everything until you ask for it. But if you do that, then you end up going 6, 7, 8 months sometimes without any such event happening. And some of them literally just never occur again. They just never actually come back. And then you end up just hoarding this resource for absolutely no reason for a very, very long amount of time. So while the surprises of new content and what the arc is going to be and what the specific events are going to be is fun, part of the entire game is predicated on the fact that we are doing long-term planning, that to play this game properly, or kind of the fun part of playing this game, is very often looking way ahead and saying, this is my target that I could get to months from now, and here are the steps that I'm going to take every day to make sure that I've got the faction credits, I've got the officers, I've got the materials, I've got this, I've got that, in order to get there. And then they just throw a bunch of curveballs at you all the time so that your planning doesn't really mean anything. And I think that really goes against some of the fundamental core of what the game is. You know, tell me down below, maybe you don't view the game that way. I do view it as kind of a long-term, like, what's my plan sort of thing. And I feel that the way that Scopely approaches things is just really throws your plans off, but not in a fun way. Like, it's fun to know what the new arc is, the new thing is, that can be a surprise. But if you've taught me that every month there is an ultra event, every month there is a syndicate event, every month there's this, I want to be able to plan around that. So I don't want you to change who the officers in the syndicate event are every single month. I don't want you to change, like, there's got to be a long-term reward path that people can get comfortable with and learn that this is the way it works. Even incursions and stuff like that, like, originally this was going to be the long-term path to the Mantis, and then we canceled incursions for like a year because they didn't work and they didn't put an alternate path in. So anyone that kind of spent the first few incursions worth of currency on their Mantis hoping to get it next month then had it canceled. Event store that just happened this month, people are used to, there's certain officers that are in the event store, so I could partially build one up, and then maybe the next time it rolls around, I can finish it. Well, they cut it down. There were only like 10 officers in this event store. I also think they used to have the jellyfish in the event store. I don't think it's there anymore. They kind of just took it out, but that used to be a path for people to get to that ship, which is a fairly important transition ship. And by taking that out, you're just taking away people's expectation. They kind of trust you that if I spend part of my credits this month on this, it's going to be there next month and I can finish it. But you can't really trust what they're going to do, and that's not always the case. Anyway, spent a long time on this topic, but I really feel that it's a fundamental one that in a planning game, you have to be able to plan. Number one, which is probably obvious, is just game performance itself. And here I feel that there's just so many bugs, laggy things in the game that we've come to accept that are not present in other games. So I tend to play mostly on the PC. I've tried to play on mobile devices. I don't know how any of y'all do it because they are super, super laggy to the point that I can barely tolerate it. But even on the PC now, I feel that it's gotten a lot worse. And there is just so much more delay in things like systems loading. Let me see if I can try and simulate some of this. Like things just take long to load in. If I was, this node is still mining, but if it was an empty one, I feel like you pull your ship off of it, the game then kind of stutters and putts around, and maybe the node resets to the full value, but sometimes it doesn't. You have to go out of the system, load back into the system in order to be able to refresh that node. They very often get stuck on zeros. One thing that I found with the new ship, and I don't know if it'll do it now, but the Borg cube tends to not tell you its real location. It tends to do this, which is it will kind of stutter in one place, then it will kind of go towards it. And eventually, the more that you play with the cube, it will just start to hang around in the middle of the system somewhere and point arrows at where it's trying to go, but it never actually goes there. And then you end up with not knowing where any of your stuff is, where its actual location in the game is completely bugged, and that's not where you're actually going to fight. The timer is bugged. With the wave defense stuff coming out now, things like battle lag and location have become much more important. In order to do those well, you need to be playing them fairly crisply. You need to know where your ship is. You need to know that when you engage something, it will in fact last for 5 seconds, and then you can move to the next target. None of this getting stuck in battle for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, things like that really take a lot out of it. Given the increased importance they've now put on territory as well, not only territory itself, but the fact that other people are probably going to come to your territory defenses to get points. When you're realistically actually fighting over certain territories, you're going to hit player caps on the system, and the lag, performance, locations, things like that are going to play a big part in it. The speed bugs on things that you'll notice your ship just flies across the entire system, but really it's way back here, and that your ship makes it to the ship, but then a timer is still going down for 15 more seconds is really annoying. Menu lag is definitely a huge thing, that there are so many menus nowadays that I feel like getting that sort of circle, even when you're just going from one thing to another, it's only a second or two, but there are so many of these menus that it's just adding more to that every time. Not to mention the fact that a lot of people then get stuck on menus. You go to click into a folder, your game just freezes, crashes. You have to completely reload the thing and go back in. Or this slider literally just gets, actually it did right here. This slider has gotten stuck. So I can't move it right now, and the game, will tell me when it's ready to go, and when it's ready to go, it will click literally a random one that I wasn't on, and I have to back out of it again, things like that. chests opening now are no longer as crisp. I found that they've gotten worse, that you open something, again, you get the spin. Sometimes the thing doesn't come up. You have to kind of either restart or back out of it, and later that chest will open up and tell you what's in there, things like that. So game performance is something that I kind of feel, particularly as they move towards a game that requires you to act quickly, to, you know, kill a bunch of waves, to do PvP, to do things like that, the game itself has to be crisp. Incursions is another thing that, as we're focused on fighting around bases in particular, there's so many targeting issues when you're trying to click over things on a planet that it's really hard to grab the ship at the right time, and it's not necessarily where it is, and you get a lot of ghosted things that if you kind of go into a system as something is either warping out or as a amalgam is being recalled, it will look like an amalgam is warping out of the system when it actually just docked back at its base. There's a whole bunch of things like that, and it's just on a level that no other commercial game that I'm aware of on the market, whether it's, you know, a PC or console game or even a mobile game, operates with the same level of latency and lag and delayed performance that this does. There are things that you can play on a phone that are full speed FPS accuracy required type games. You can play things like Fortnite, Call of Duty, whatever, with things that have to be basically to the millisecond correct and accurate. And we can't get a battle to happen within 5 seconds consistently. It's just not working. We can't tell you exactly where a ship is accurately, that they will just kind of warp around. There are cases even in PvP that you'll be, well, PvP and PvE, but it's more impactful in PvP. You'll be kind of chasing someone, and then if you click on them again, you will literally warp in front of them to the place that they were going to go, and you can turn around and kill them. And it's just a bug that if you kind of click at the right time, it will take you to the end path of where you're trying to go. Why that happens, I don't know, but it makes a pretty big difference when you're trying to chase someone down in a PvP fight, which again is becoming a bigger part of the game. So I think probably everyone agrees with this one. I'm curious which ones of the others people agree with, or what you think the solution might be. This particular one, I think they just kind of need to, I think it's coding optimization. I think a lot of it is potentially the number of things being called every time things happen. And I know it's an old game and things are just kind of stacked on top of each other as they're coding it, but just a bunch of things like the old inventory we have and everything is really annoying. And it's particularly rough when you're trying to make quick moves like transitioning between crews and things like that. And you kind of go into manage your officers and you've just got this now massive bar. There's like I think there's like 220 officers at this point. And to have to kind of scroll through that and have that get stuck and stutter on you while you're trying to kind of go through and make your decisions and things like that. So anyway, curious down below. Tell me if I've missed something that you think is a really big game issue that is kind of detracting from your enjoyment, or if you feel that any of these are wrong, basically, that you don't agree with, say, the state of PvP or the balance of the game or whatever. Let me know. Or maybe you like that events kind of come at you, by surprise. I know that very often when I bring it up on like Discord, there's kind of two camps that some people are like, yeah, that's annoying that they do all these surprise events. And I just spent something yesterday and now you have an event for it where I should have saved it, but you never told me to save that, whatever. And a lot of people's response is just like, well, tough, save everything. Just never spend anything until they tell you to. That's the way it is. I don't think that's fun. I think part of the fun part of the game to me has always been it's a game where so many things take so much time that one of the best parts is that you could always be upgrading or doing something to improve. So even though something like getting a better ship is something that can take months, you could always be doing some research. You could always be improving on this faction. You can always be improving on this officer, whatever. But if you're just in a horde mentality, then you end up kind of in a position I am here, where I have the resources to build buildings. I have the resources to do research. I have the resources to upgrade ships, whatever, but I'm not doing it because I'm not being explicitly told to do it at the moment. And if I do it now, I'm going to be screwing myself for whatever things are coming out in January that I need to spend on. Or again, this upcoming tomorrow, it won't surprise me at all. Tomorrow's Saturday when I'm recording this. It won't surprise me at all if there's suddenly a leaderboard out of nowhere with really important officers on it, and I need to do well on that leaderboard or that SMS, and they just never mentioned it to us. So if I upgrade something today, I could be screwing myself tomorrow. So we just don't do it. And I don't think that that's a fun way to approach it. Anyway, that was back to number 2. But let me know and take care.